Before the world knew him as a king, before thunder became his voice, and the sky his domain, Zeus was simply a witness to fear. He was born into a universe where power devoured itself, where fathers consumed sons, and survival depended not on strength, but on timing, silence, and patience. This is not a story about dominance. It is not a tale of conquest or glory. Tonight, we explore Zeus, not as the ruler of Olympus, but as a being shaped by responsibility, isolation, and the quiet burden of holding the world together. Here on Slivor, stories are told gently, with no urgency, no sharp turns, and no need to stay awake. If you find comfort in these calm journeys, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe to the channel on Zinsai, so more quiet stories can find you on nights like this. Now, let the noise of the day fade away. Let your breathing slow, and allow this story of Zeus to unfold softly, one moment at a time. Zeus did not grow up dreaming of the sky. There were no open horizons in his earliest memories, no sense of freedom or vastness. His first awareness of the world was narrow, enclosed, and quiet, shaped by the need to remain unseen. He learned early that survival was not about strength, but about absence, about not being noticed, about existing between moments. He was hidden away from his father, not out of love, but out of fear. Cronus, ruler of the Titans, did not hate his children. He feared them. Fear, after all, does not require cruelty to become destructive. It only requires imagination. Cronus had been warned that one of his sons would one day unseat him, and in that prophecy he heard not possibility, but inevitability. So he swallowed his children, not in rage, not in madness, but in cold, deliberate certainty. Zeus was spared not because he was special, but because his mother Rhea chose hesitation over obedience. In that hesitation, the future found its opening. She hid him away, exchanging him for a stone wrapped in cloth, and the world continued its pattern of quiet violence above, unaware of the small life growing beyond its reach. Zeus was raised in isolation, surrounded not by gods, but by echoes, the rustle of wind through leaves, the steady rhythm of waves against stone, the low hum of existence continuing without ceremony. Those early years did not teach him authority. They taught him restraint. He learned to listen before he learned to speak. Without the presence of a father, Zeus constructed his understanding of power indirectly. Power was something that destroyed without warning. Power was something that consumed its own future in order to preserve the present. From this distance, Zeus began to form a quiet resolve, not to oppose power outright, but to understand it. understanding, he sensed, was safer than rebellion. He watched the world carefully, gathering fragments of meaning from what little he could observe. The cycles of nature, the inevitability of growth, the slow erosion of stone. Nothing lasted unchanged. Even mountains bent to time. The lesson settled deep within him. Permanence was an illusion upheld by fear. As Zeus matured, so did his awareness of what waited beyond his shelter. Cronus ruled a universe defined by stagnation. There was order, yes, but it was the order of still water, unmoving and heavy. No room for evolution, no tolerance for uncertainty. Zeus understood then that his survival was not an accident, it was a postponement. One day he would have to step into the open. Yet even as this realization formed, there was no impatience in him. He did not rush toward destiny. He allowed time to shape him. Strength, when rushed, becomes brittle. Patience, when practiced, becomes depth. Those who later spoke of Zeus as impulsive or domineering misunderstood the origins of his nature. His early restraint was not passivity, it was calibration. He was measuring the world long before he touched it. He began to sense the loneliness that would follow him into adulthood. Not the loneliness of abandonment, but the loneliness of separation, of knowing truths that could not yet be spoken, of carrying awareness without audience. In that solitude, Zeus developed a careful inner discipline. He learned to wait without resentment, to prepare without display, to exist quietly within the shadow of something vast and dangerous. When the time came, and it would come, inevitably, he would not confront his father as a child challenging authority. He would confront him as a mirror. And mirrors do not argue, they reveal. As Zeus stood on the threshold between concealment and emergence, the world remained unchanged. Cronus continued to rule. The Titans continued their endless dominion. The prophecy remained unfulfilled. But beneath the still surface of that universe, something irreversible had begun. Not a rebellion, not yet, just awareness. And awareness, once awakened, never returns to sleep. When Zeus finally stepped beyond the safety of concealment, the world did not tremble. There was no thunder to announce him, no rupture in the sky, no sudden shift in the balance of power. Change rarely arrives with spectacle at first. It arrives quietly, moving through forgotten corridors, unnoticed until it has already passed. Zeus entered the wider world not as a challenger, but as an observer. He learned the language of the Titans by listening rather than speaking. Their conversations were not filled with cruelty, but with certainty. Certainty that the world had reached its final shape. Certainty that their rule was synonymous with stability. To them, change was not growth. It was threat. This mindset confirmed what Zeus had sensed long ago. Cronus did not rule through strength alone. He ruled through the preservation of sameness. The Titans feared what could not be predicted, and so they eliminated it before it could form. Zeus did not confront this directly. Instead, he learned its rhythms. He studied the habits of power, how decisions were delayed, how authority disguised itself as inevitability, how silence was rewarded more often than honesty. He noticed how even the Titans, immense and ancient, moved cautiously around Cronus, careful not to awaken the very fear that drove him. Fear, Zeus realized, does not disappear when power is attained. It calcifies. The closer Zeus moved toward the center of that world, the more acutely he felt its weight. Not oppression exactly, but suffocation, a narrowing of possibility. Everything existed within defined boundaries, and nothing was allowed to outgrow its assigned role. Zeus began to understand that overthrowing Cronus would not simply be an act of force. It would be an act of redefinition. The universe itself would need to learn a new grammar, and grammars take time to change. He sought out the remnants of what Cronus had tried to erase: whispers of dissent, fragmented loyalties, quiet dissatisfaction hidden behind obedience. These were not armies, they were questions, and Zeus treated them with care. He did not promise victory. He offered understanding. To those who listened, he spoke not of prophecy, but of possibility, not of revenge, but of release. He framed change not as destruction, but as movement, something natural, inevitable, and long overdue. This approach confused many. They expected anger. They expected a challenger fueled by resentment. Instead, Zeus carried a calm that unsettled them more deeply. Calm suggests confidence, and confidence threatens systems built on fear. Even as his influence grew, Zeus remained cautious. He knew that premature action would only reinforce Cronus's worldview. Force, when used too early, validates the fears it seeks to dismantle. So he waited. In that waiting, Zeus encountered the weight of moral ambiguity. He questioned his own intentions. Was he truly seeking balance, or merely replacing one form of control with another? The question did not frighten him. It grounded him. Power that never interrogates itself becomes indistinguishable from tyranny. Zeus promised himself that if he ever ruled, he would not do so from fear of replacement. He would accept change as continuity rather than collapse. Whether he could keep that promise remained uncertain, but the intention mattered. As the groundwork slowly took shape, Zeus felt the distance between himself and Cronus narrow, not physically, but conceptually. The father and son were no longer opposites. They were parallel forces approaching a point of collision. Cronus, sensing disturbance in the fabric of his rule, began to tighten his grasp. Order became rigid. Surveillance increased. Silence deepened. And still, Zeus did not strike. He understood now that the true moment of transformation would not be when Cronus fell, but when the universe realized it could move forward without consuming its future to protect its present. That moment was nearing. Not with thunder, not with spectacle, but with a decision that could no longer be delayed. And Zeus, patient and prepared, stood quietly at its edge. The turning point did not arrive as an eruption of violence. but as a quiet convergence of necessity. By the time Zeus chose to act, the world around him had already shifted. Not outwardly. Cronus still ruled. The Titans still held dominion. But beneath that surface, belief had loosened its grip. Certainty had begun to crack. Zeus sensed it in the pauses between commands, in the way obedience now required repetition. Authority, once unquestioned, was being rehearsed. And anything that must be rehearsed is already unstable. He approached his father not as a son seeking acknowledgement, but as a presence impossible to ignore. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voice. Zeus did not accuse Cronus of cruelty or injustice. He did not appeal to prophecy or fate. He appealed to exhaustion. Cronus, ancient and vigilant, had spent eons guarding against his own end. The effort had hardened him. Power had not freed him. It had trapped him in constant vigilance. Zeus recognized this not as weakness, but as weariness. In their exchange, Zeus spoke of continuity, of the cost of eternal resistance, of the quiet truth that control born from fear only delays what it seeks to prevent. His words were not a challenge. They were an invitation to rest. Cronus did not accept. Fear rarely does. What followed was not a battle in the way stories would later simplify it. It was a dismantling. Alliances shifted. Loyalties revealed themselves. The Titans, once unified by certainty, fractured under the weight of doubt. Zeus did not revel in this. Each fracture carried consequence. Each shift represented loss as well as possibility. He felt the gravity of what he was setting in motion. Not triumph, but responsibility. The act of freeing his swallowed siblings was not driven by vengeance. It was an act of restoration, a refusal to allow fear to define the shape of the future. When they emerged, altered by their confinement, Zeus did not see weapons. He saw survivors. Together, they did not destroy the old world. They replaced its premise. Power no longer flowed from prevention, but from participation. Authority became something negotiated, not imposed. When Cronus finally fell, it was not beneath Zeus's wrath, but beneath the accumulated weight of his own choices. The world did not cheer. It exhaled. Zeus felt no triumph in that moment, only stillness, a heavy awareness that ascent carries its own solitude. To end a cycle is to inherit its unresolved echoes. As the Titans receded and the new order emerged, Zeus stood at the center not as a conqueror, but as a custodian. He understood that his rule would be judged not by its strength, but by its openness to what came next. The sky, now his domain, did not feel like possession. It felt like exposure, endless, visible, and unforgiving. There would be no hiding in it. For the first time, Zeus felt the quiet burden of leadership settle fully upon him. The realization that to rule was not to command, but to hold space for contradiction, for growth, for the unknown. The war had ended, but the work had just begun. And Zeus, newly crowned, looked upward not in pride, but in uncertainty, aware that the sky remembers every storm and every silence that follows. With the fall of Cronus, the universe did not become simpler. It became quieter. The silence that followed was not relief, but adjustment. Power had shifted, yet the weight of existence remained. Zeus quickly discovered that ruling a new order required more restraint than overthrowing an old one. Victory had resolved conflict, but it had not resolved meaning. Olympus rose not as a monument to dominance, but as a compromise. A place elevated above the world, distant enough to observe, close enough to intervene. Zeus did not design it to inspire awe. He designed it to create space between impulse and action, between authority and consequence. Still, distance carries cost. From Olympus, Zeus saw everything, yet touched very little. The sky widened around him, vast and indifferent. The more expansive his domain became, the more acutely he felt separation. Leadership did not grant closeness. It demanded remove. The other gods began to define themselves within this new structure. Each brought their own needs, ambitions, and unresolved wounds from the war. Zeus listened more than he spoke. He allowed disagreement to surface, believing that suppressed conflict would only return in darker forms. This tolerance unsettled many. Order, they expected, would mean clarity. Instead, Zeus offered complexity. He did not rule by issuing constant decrees. He ruled by presence, by being available, by allowing tension to exist without immediately neutralizing it. Yet restraint, when mistaken for passivity, invites testing. Challenges arose quietly at first. Minor transgressions, disregarded boundaries. Zeus responded not with punishment, but with attention. He understood that enforcement without understanding only recreates fear, but even patience has limits. As the gods grew accustomed to autonomy, the necessity of structure became unavoidable. Zeus began to articulate boundaries, not as absolute laws, but as shared agreements. Balance required definition. Freedom without shape collapses into chaos. Each decision weighed heavily. Zeus remembered his vow not to become his father. And yet, he also recognized that leadership demands choice, and choice inevitably excludes alternatives. There were nights when the sky felt unbearably empty, when Zeus wondered whether the universe had exchanged one form of confinement for another, whether openness could truly coexist with authority. The mortals below entered his awareness gradually, fragile, fleeting, yet startlingly resilient. Their lives unfolded in brief arcs, filled with emotion disproportionate to their scale. Zeus observed them with fascination and discomfort. They reminded him of what gods had surrendered for permanence. Zeus intervened rarely at first, wary of imposing divine will upon delicate systems. But when he did, he felt something unexpected: connection. Imperfect, momentary, but real. The sky, once distant, became responsive. Still, each intervention altered the balance. Zeus began to feel the tension between involvement and restraint, between care and control. The same tension that had defined Cronus' downfall now reappeared in subtler form within himself. Power, he realized, does not announce when it begins to resemble fear. It rationalizes. And so Zeus returned again and again to silence. to reflection, to the careful weighing of action against consequence. He reminded himself that stability was not the absence of movement, but the ability to absorb it. As Olympus settled into its role, Zeus understood that his reign would not be remembered for its beginning, but for how it endured, for whether it allowed the world to breathe or slowly taught it to hold its breath once more. The sky remained wide above him, and within that vastness Zeus stood watchful, uncertain, committed to a balance that would never remain still. As time unfolded beneath the open sky, Zeus began to sense a subtle shift within himself. It did not arrive as corruption, nor as hunger for dominance. It arrived as familiarity. Authority, once heavy and foreign, slowly became habitual. Decisions that once demanded careful reflection now emerged with increasing ease. Ease, Zeus knew, was dangerous. Power does not announce when it begins to harden. It settles. Zeus found himself intervening more often, not out of fear, but out of confidence. He believed he understood the patterns of the world well enough to adjust them. Mortals with their brief lives and intense emotions drew his attention repeatedly. Their devotion was unguarded, their belief uncomplicated. Belief, when directed toward a figure of power, creates asymmetry. Zeus felt its pull. Each prayer, each offering reinforced his presence in their lives. The sky became not just a domain, but a symbol of protection, of judgment, of inevitability. Zeus did not seek worship, but he accepted it. Acceptance, too, is a choice. With acceptance came distance. The more Zeus was elevated in the minds of mortals, the less he was perceived as a participant in the world's uncertainty. He became a constant. Constants are rarely questioned. They are relied upon, and reliance reshapes behavior. Zeus began to recognize how influence multiplies beyond intention. A single intervention could ripple outward, altering choices, beliefs, and futures unseen. Even benevolence, when unexamined, creates dependency. This realization unsettled him. He remembered the stillness of his youth, the time when survival meant listening rather than shaping. That memory felt distant now, softened by time and reverence. Yet its echo remained, reminding him that power once observed from the margins appears differently from power exercised at the center. Among the gods, tensions surfaced. Autonomy clashed with hierarchy. Zeus found himself mediating disputes not just of action, but of meaning. As the story of Zeus gently comes to rest, here, the needing more for you to hold. No final judgment, no lesson that needs to be remembered, only the quiet sense that even the greatest power eventually learns to soften. Here on Slivor, these stories are shared not to awaken ambition, but to ease the mind into stillness, to let the weight of the day loosen, and allow thought to drift without direction. If this calm journey through the life of Zeus brought you comfort, or simply kept you company in the quiet of the night, You're welcome to like the video and subscribe to the channel so more gentle bedtime stories can find you again. For now, let the sky fade into darkness. Let your breathing slow and deep. There is nothing left to decide. Sleep will arrive when it is ready. Good night, and may your rest be peaceful.